You won't heal OCD by playing it safe, but OCD really wants us to play that game. It tells us don't take the chance, don't put yourself into an uncomfortable position where you experience anxiety because it's not worth it. You're going to feel bad, and why do you want to experience that? But unfortunately, when we take that kind of mindset, that's when we remain stuck with it. So in today's episode, I'll be talking about some of the steps that you can take to stop playing it safe with OCD and actually start beginning to make some progress. If you are struggling and you would like some support, I do offer a free discovery call. To get that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There's a link in the show notes. OCD is a master at keeping us playing it safe, of kind of keeping us in our comfort zone. But unfortunately, when we listen to it, when we don't take on challenges or we don't do difficult things, because we're kind of fearful of the emotional response that we might get, this is when we really kind of stay stuck. And if you struggle with OCD, of course, you're going to be aware of the OCD cycle, where a particular thought or situation gives you a lot of anxiety. And so you perform that compulsion in order to kind of feel better in the short term. But then, of course, we kind of get stuck in a trap doing that. And this can kind of go on, indefinitely over weeks, months, or even years at times. And the way out of that trap is to actually recognize that, we don't have to do that, that we have agency, we have choice. And when we actually act on that agency, when we choose to take action, despite the fact that we may not really be feeling up to it, that we might be experiencing a lot of anxiety or uncertainty about that particular obsession, about that particular thing, we recognize that, but we take action anyway. That's when things really can change. And this is why exposure is such a big part of learning to overcome OCD. When we play it safe, when we choose to stay in our comfort zone, okay, it's true that we might not be feeling too bad. We might not experience too much anxiety. We might be feeling a bit more confident, a bit more in control. But the reality is that it's a kind of fake sense of control because you're not really pushing yourself. You're not learning how to tolerate discomfort. You're not learning how to allow anxiety to be there in the background. And these are essential skills if we really want to overcome OCD in the long term. And so finding a way to kind of push ourselves, to challenge ourselves, even when we're not really feeling up to it, is actually how we begin to kind of move past OCD. You don't necessarily, have to kind of, take on the most difficult challenges, at first. In fact, I wouldn't encourage you to do that at all. I would encourage you to kind of gently push back against the OCD, to identify, some of the things that you're perhaps avoiding, or some of the things that you really should do, but that you're not doing because the anxiety is present, or you have a lot of uncertainty about that thing. And once you've identified what some of those things are, to actually start taking some action to demonstrate to yourself that you're stronger than the OCD. OCD does not want you to think that. It wants you to believe that you're a kind of prisoner to it, that you have to do all of these compulsions in order to feel better. But when we start taking action, when we step outside of that comfort zone and prove to ourselves that actually this simply isn't true, that you have much more strength than perhaps you're giving yourself credit for, that you are able to take action despite the fact that you're feeling anxious or shameful or whatever it is that you're experiencing. So a great activity to do this is to actually, once a week, reflect on what are some of the things that you might be avoiding right now. And it doesn't have to be things about your particular obsession. Of course, if it is, then that's great. But a lot of the time, there's also things that we're very anxious about, that we're avoiding, that we're obsessing about. But it isn't so obvious. OCD can be very sneaky in that way. We might find ourselves obsessing about something, that we really don't like. But it isn't obvious that it's a kind of obsession. We might tell ourselves that, this is just something that we don't like in our lives. But actually, it's quite likely that it's related to an obsession in some way. Maybe you're avoiding a difficult conversation with somebody. Maybe you're not wanting to go somewhere because it reminds you of something, something that you didn't like, or you had a negative experience in that place. Whatever it might be, the idea is to kind of sit down each week and reflect on what are some of the things that you feel that you're avoiding right now. What are some of the things that you know you should be doing, but for some reason you aren't quite doing right now? And the idea then is to kind of pick 2 or 3 things that week that you're going to do, and you're going to lean into that discomfort, despite the fact that you're not really feeling ready to do that. You're going to kind of prove to yourself that actually you can do that thing. And, it may not be doing the whole thing outright to begin with. It might be taking, a few steps towards doing that thing, just so you can get into the practice of kind of leaning into that discomfort. But when we actually reflect on this each week, what are the things that we're kind of avoiding? Are there some things, for example, that maybe you're wanting to do absolutely perfectly? That maladaptive perfectionism is coming in, and you're demanding, that you do that thing perfectly. So you're kind of not even starting it at all, because, to get started with it is really uncomfortable, because so often we're telling ourselves that, we need to do that thing absolutely right. So we don't even bother to get started because it gives us anxiety just kind of just thinking about it. But if you were to get started, you don't need to finish it, but just getting started and allowing things to be a bit more messy, a bit more uncomfortable. Really what we're doing is we're bringing ourselves out of our comfort zones and allowing a little bit more discomfort to be there in the background. And the more that we can do that, well, this is exposure. This is allowing uncertainty. This is allowing discomfort. When we can do that, we really prove to ourselves, that we're stronger than we think we are. And, it's a little bit like elasticity. If you keep pulling an elastic band again and again and again, eventually the length of that elastic band starts to increase, because you keep on pulling it. You keep on coming up against your kind of point of resistance, and then you pull a little bit further. And it's the same here when we're doing exposure activities. Over time, you can increase your ability to allow that discomfort to be there. You can prove to yourself that you can do things that perhaps you've been telling yourself that you can't. And like I was saying before, sometimes this is about our obsessions, and other times it might be about things that are completely unrelated. But actually, when you think about it, you're coming up against the same kind of thing. You're coming up against difficult emotions that are underlying that thing that you're avoiding. And just by learning to lean into that, that might also help you with your particular themes that you're struggling with as well. So many thanks. I really hope that you enjoyed that. Please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And also, if you are struggling with OCD and anxiety and you would like to get some support with that, well, I offer a free discovery call. To get that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There's a link in the show notes. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are dealing with OCD, anxiety, or any mental health concerns, please consult a licensed mental health professional for support.